So we talked about a few assumptions of Piaget's theory. We talked about, hopefully you watched part two of this lecture where I gave a concrete example of assimilation and accommodation, and now we're into part three. We're still talking about those basic assumptions of Piaget. And so another basic assumption is that interaction with physical and social environments is essential. And so being able to allow students to explore, being able to allow students to talk with one another, talk to you, having that communication and that physical interaction is very, very important. Another basic assumption is equilibration, which promotes progression toward increasingly complex thought. And so I'll talk about equilibration in more detail in just a moment. And then children think in qualitatively different ways at different ages. So we talked about assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation, we're dealing with a new object in a consistent way with a currently existing theme, so we can easily fit it in with an existing mental folder, an existing schema that we already have. Whereas accommodation, our scheme needs to be adjusted when new information doesn't fit. So then we're creating those new mental folders. So when we have movement back and forth from equilibrium to there's going to be constant movement. So this is what equilibration is all about. Equilibration is when we're moving from equilibrium, where there's a balance, to disequilibrium. So think about whenever you're going through the process of assimilation. When I have my cars and trucks, I had those schemes. I knew exactly where they would fit in these folders. Well, I have a constant balance. I'm not confused. I'm feeling confident. That is when I'm experiencing equilibrium. Okay? So think about equilibrium and assimilation synonymously. When I'm going through the process of assimilation, I'm also feeling equilibrium. However, when I'm going through the process of accommodation, I'm thinking, just like that SUV for the first time, I'm thinking, okay, wait, there's something that's not quite right here. It looks like a car, has characteristics of a car in a truck. What's going on? Wait, this is not, it's neither a car or a truck. It's an SUV. And so there's a little confusion. There's a little maybe apprehensiveness, a little anxiety going on. So you're experiencing disequilibrium throughout the process of accommodation. So think of disequilibrium and accommodation synonymously. So when you are in a state of equilibrium and you move to disequilibrium because you're trying to accommodate that new information, and then you move back to equilibrium, that is the process of equilibration, when we're moving from equilibrium to disequilibrium and then back. Okay, so whenever we're teaching our students, we don't always want them to be able to assimilate everything that we're talking about, because then think about it. Are they really being challenged? Are they really being pushed? Or is everything already fitting into stuff that they already know? Or are we pushing them to think a little bit outside the box, letting them think critically, getting them a little uncomfortable every now and then so they can force them to figure it out on their own? They're experiencing that disequilibrium, okay? And so through accommodation, so moving from balance to unbalance, back to balance, because once your students get it, once your students move past accommodation, they're like, okay, I got this. I have a new schema for it. I know exactly what this is. So you want them to come back to that equilibrium piece. Okay? So going through this process, it promotes development of more complex thought and understanding. And it's the desire for balance. It forces students to construct new schemes or accommodate existing schemes. So here's a graphic showing what's happening. So through that process of equilibration, we're moving from assimilation to accommodation back to assimilation. or equilibrium to disequilibrium back to equilibrium. So, in the theory of constructivism, people construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. So when we take in new information, we interpret it, we distort it, we elaborate on it, we impose a meaning on it, we connect it to things that we already know, we connect it to our experiences that we already have. Okay, we never encode information in a pure unaltered form. When you learn about new concepts, you immediately connect it to something that you already know, something that you've experienced previously. That's why it's so important that we do the same thing to our students. It helps them understand those concepts so much better if we know our students really well, if we know what backgrounds they come from, if we know what academic level they're on, so then we can pinpoint where they are, what their experiences are, and then we can connect new concepts to what they already know. Okay? So then they can elaborate on it and impose meaning on it. We cannot receive knowledge, only construct it. And a teacher cannot give knowledge, only foster its development. Going back to being that facilitator, being that, allowing students to explore and expand and create, construct new knowledge. So before we talk about Piaget's theory further, I want you to pause the lecture right here because I want you to go back in Module 2 and notice that there's a video that I have posted on Blackboard. We're going to this constructivist social studies lesson, grades 4 and 5. I want you to just pause. I want you to think about what we've talked about already, what you've read in this particular chapter, what we've talked about already, and I want you to watch this video and I want you to think about these particular questions. How would you describe this classroom environment? How are the students involved in this lesson? What aspects of Piaget's theory do you see in this video? So I really want you to think about those aspects of constructivism, those aspects of Piaget. You don't have to write and turn in the answers to these questions. I just really want you to reflect on what we've talked about so far on constructivism and Piaget. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch the video, reflect on it, think about it from the perspective of constructivism. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about Piaget's theory, and we're going to talk about those stages of cognitive development. And so Piaget proposed that children move through 4 stages. There's periods of time that are consistent in age and developmental sequence. However, these age ranges are averages. What one individual may experience at a specific age may not be the same as another student. And so some children are in transition from one stage to the next. Some individuals may be in that sensory motor stage for a whole lot longer before they move into that pre-operational stage. So the first stage, however, Piaget believes that we all move through these stages in the same order, even if the ages may not be the exact same. So sensory motor stage, this begins with reflexes, sensory motor schemes. So when we think about schemes, again, we're thinking about those mental folders. So schemes are based largely on their behaviors and their perceptions. They're exploring at this age. This is from until they're born from 0 to age 2. So especially in the early part of this stage, children cannot think about things that are not immediately in front of them. And so they focus on what they are doing and seeing at the moment. And so that's where that goal-directed behavior emerges. I see something, I'm going to grab it, I'm going to put it in my mouth, I'm exploring it. Object permanence emerges where, when they're really little, you may pull a blanket over your head and they think that you have disappeared. They think you are gone. They don't realize that you're still there. And so as they get closer to age 2, they start realizing, oh, you're playing peekaboo, but you're still there. You really didn't disappear. Okay? Symbolic thought begins to emerge as well. And then we have our pre-operational stage. So this is thanks in part to their rapidly developing symbolic thinking abilities. So now children can think and talk about things beyond their immediate experience. However, they still do not have reason in logical adult ways. And so they have limited symbolic representation, they have limited mental manipulation and operations. They're learning how to maybe add and subtract. They're experiencing ecocentrism. Everything's about them. Okay, they're not able to conserve yet. So if I have two containers that hold the same amount of water, but one's really tall and skinny and the other one is wide and fat, if I pour water in one, I might ask, I'll ask a young child, they may think that more water is in one than in the other. Okay, so they're not able to conserve just yet. Then individuals move into the concrete operational stage. This is adult-like logic appears, but it's limited to reasoning about concrete, real-life situations. And so they can experience some mental manipulation, some logical thought, but it's still developing. It's still very premature. They can conserve at this time. They're learning to classify objects into different categories. They can complete reverse operations. However, they're still having some difficulty with abstract and counterfactual ideas. This is from ages 6 to 7 until about ages 11, 12. Then we have our formal operational stage. This is where logical thinking processes are applied to abstract ideas, as well to concrete objects and situations. Many capabilities essential for advanced reasoning in science and mathematics appear. So you may think, well, surely my students at the high school level are in that formal operational stage. Not necessarily. So again, Piaget believes that we all move through these through the same progression, but you will still have, even if you're teaching high school, I can guarantee you that some students may still be at that concrete operational stage. So when you think about if you're teaching concepts that seem a bit abstract, think about how can you make it concrete? Can you use models? Can you use some type of hands-on activity? Can you use videos? Something that will make it a little more concrete and relatable to them. So here's an example of combinatorial thought. Okay, this is one of the characteristics that students will experience at a formal operation stage. Okay, this is where you have, 4 friends. They may or may not decide to go to the school dance. They wonder if they will see each other at the dance. Which one or more of the 4 friends might we see at the dance? How many possibilities are there? That's when they, how many different combinations can we create? And finally, we have current perspectives. So the research does support sequence. There is a sequence where these stages we go through the same sequence, but it does not support ages. Again, what one individual may experience at one age does not mean that the next individual will. Knowledge, experience, and culture affects reasoning abilities. So when you think about our lower SES students who may have limited experiences at home, limited resources, they're going to come in, they may come in with less knowledge, less experience, so they'll have less to connect to whenever you're teaching those concepts. And cognitive development may not be universally stage-like. Okay? So that's all for Piaget, and if you have any questions, please let me know, and there should be an assignment posted on Blackboard to complete. Thanks so much.